So let's step back and get a good sort of a legal assessment where we stand with both legal broadsides going on, one involving the former president, of course, the other, the present occupant of the White House, at least through his son and his son's business partners. Andy McCarthy back with us. Tom Dupree back with us. Nicole Parker, former FBI special agent, back with us. Thank you all. Andy, if I could begin with you on, first off, what the president is likely facing tomorrow. We've gotten kind of used to this. This is the third time we're going through this, but this is Washington, D.C., different traffic rules, I understand. But help us through this. What will this be like?
Well, because there's been an arraignment, Neil, or because there's been an indictment, this will be an arraignment, which means it's a proceeding before the court in which the former president will be asked to enter a plea to the indictment that was just filed yesterday. He'll obviously enter a plea of not guilty. It'll be choreographed in the sense that because of the security concerns, the Secret Service will have collaborated with the court personnel and the other agencies involved in the case to make sure that the former president is ushered into the court, is processed as everybody is when they get brought into the criminal justice system. They'll bring him to court. It'll be short. He'll enter a plea. Bail will not be an issue in this case. And what will happen is the case has already been assigned to a judge. It's not clear to me whether the judge will do this proceeding tomorrow or hand it off to a magistrate judge, as is pretty common. But they could very well start setting a schedule for pretrial motions and the like as early as tomorrow.
So let's get into that a little bit. I believe you're talking about this federal district judge, Tanya Chutkan. She was appointed by Barack Obama back in 2014, Tom Dupree. She's known to be pretty harsh when it comes to these Capitol Hill rioters and has handed out some of the stiffer sentences to them. I'm just wondering, knowing what you do, and I know these are random selections, it's sort of like a lottery for judges ultimately chosen here, but how do you think this will go?
I think it is a very significant difference than what President Trump has experienced and will experience before, say, Judge Cannon in Florida. Judge Chutkan, as you noted, is an Obama appointee. She has had a number of these January 6 cases before her, and she's really kind of blazed a different trail than a lot of the other federal judges in D.C., in that in some of these January 6 cases, she's actually imposed even harsher sentences than the government was pushing for. She's also had some involvement in some of the January 6 document discovery. It was her order that basically opened a lot of the floodgates to allow investigators to get a hold of Trump White House materials and the like. So she's also different than Judge Cannon in that she has some background familiarity with this whole January 6 investigation. She's familiar with the players, the legal issues, and probably not going too far out on a limb, Neil, to say she is not going to be as favorable to former President Trump as Judge Cannon has been.
If I could switch gears, guys, and Nicole, if I could do so with you concerning Devon Archer, the business associate of Hunter Biden's, and his testimony. It wasn't testimony, it was a question-answer session with the House Oversight Committee behind closed doors. A lot of people are hoping for a transcript or some sort of an exact, detailed exchange of what went down there, because Democrats say it wasn't damning at all to either Hunter Biden or, for that matter, the president. Republicans just the opposite. There does seem to be, Nicole, again, this criticism you hear, namely from Republicans, that there's a double standard of justice going on here. But what do you think?
You know, as far as we know right now, based on what we've heard without seeing the transcript, it absolutely seems like there's a, two-tier justice system here. The things that Hunter Biden allegedly did and that maybe Joe Biden was involved with, if that was on the other side of the spectrum, if President Trump had been involved in that, there's no way that he would get away with that. Absolutely not. And so I think it'll be very interesting. I think with this, transcript coming out allegedly tomorrow, based on the patterns that we've seen, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a fourth indictment of former President Trump, coming in on Friday, based on the pattern that we've seen every time that there's mounting evidence against the Bidens, almost the next day, without fail, there's another count, another indictment, or something against former President Trump.
Andy, what do you make of the significance of just getting that transcript and people at home, reading it for themselves? People always see things, and I understand that, through the prism of their biases or their own politics, and so Republicans will assume the worst. Democrats, it's not so bad, and let's move on here. Will that settle some of these issues?
Well, sure it will, because we get to see it for ourselves. I think, Neil, that the Republicans, and I'm not saying this in a partisan way because I support them more ideologically, it's just a fact, they've been much better about getting these transcripts public when they don't need to be under wraps. And I would contrast that to the Russiagate situation, where especially in the Intelligence Committee that was run by Adam Schiff, they would cherry pick what they took out of the stuff that went on behind closed doors that they let us see. And by that way, they were able to sort of fabricate a version of events. So it's always much better to have the full transcript. And the one other thing I would add about the two-tiered justice system that Nicole was talking about, we at least have an indictment of former President Trump that we'll be dealing with tomorrow, whereas with Hunter Biden, we have crimes that go back to 2014. Every day the statute of limitations is running because the Biden Justice Department has not filed an indictment.
It is interesting, though, when you step back and look at what we are learning in the pursuit of Donald Trump. Whether justified or not, we're up to 78 different counts and charges over 3 different sweeping indictments. Some will say fully justified, others say a little bit overkill. I'm not smart enough to know myself. But on this, it can be said, even in the handling of the plea bargain deal for Hunter Biden, that it was sloppy, ill-prepared, and in the end, unsuccessful. And no guarantee right now it can be sorted out, even though we're told, DOJ is still investigating. Do you have confidence they are?
Well, Neil, my sense on that is...
I don't have confidence they are.
Tom Dupree first. I'm sorry, I wasn't clear.
I'm sorry, Tom.
Sorry. Neil, I was just going to say, look, my sense is I don't have a lot of confidence that this investigation is going on. And I say that for a few reasons. One is I was absolutely shocked by the way that whole plea bargain played out. These are very sophisticated lawyers on both sides. And to me, it is absolutely unimaginable that they would come to court with this deal they were asking the judge to bless and not have reached an agreement on the most fundamental question of all, whether this agreement would insulate Hunter Biden from prosecution for further crimes. If I were Hunter Biden's lawyers, I would take the deal even without future immunity, because he is getting an extremely favorable deal of pleading out to 2 misdemeanors on the tax counts, diversion on the gun count. But I'm not quite sure what DOJ is up to. I mean, we're told this investigation is going on, but it's been going on for years, and we have seen very, very little when it comes to actual evidence or actual charges. All
right, we might get a better idea in the next 24 to 48 hours, maybe on both. But for the time being, the debate rages on between various news organizations alike, which is the more important story. We thought we'd address both here today. I thank you all very much. I apologize for the truncated time.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.